It was her beautiful buttocks that gave her away. I'd recognize Samantha's ass anywhere. Even without the dragonfly tattoo on her left cheek, I would have recognized her. The woman in the video straightened up a bit, and I could make out the rose on her right shoulder blade. There was no doubt about it. It would have been fine if it was a secret beach video or something, but it was a video from the Secret Lovemaking Society, and she was enthusiastically making love. As far as I could see, the only thing she was wearing was her damn wedding ring. Irony of fate. The reasoning part of my brain highlighted important facts about the video. It had to be about 15 years old. Samantha hadn't worn her hair like that for that long. It coincided with the time I contracted with an oil company for 18 months of remote station work. Great money that practically saved us after my company shut down and left me unemployed. With 2 small children and a house near foreclosure, we were in serious trouble. Samantha's salary as a nursing assistant wasn't even enough to survive, and we were desperate. I had been looking for work for months, working behind the counter at a video store for something to do when I got this offer. An almost forgotten job I had done in college analyzing oil rig safety systems turned out to be a lifesaver. It was a tough 18 months in places I never wanted to be, but it secured our future. I got a steady job because of it, although we had to move halfway across the country to get one almost immediately upon my return. I worried about us while I worked at those remote stations. Anyone would have had those concerns. Samantha was so desperately attached to me when I returned that I put all my worries aside and ignored them. Apparently, however, while I was miserable, Samantha had a very different experience. The camera was moving. The video, taken probably in a large empty office with mattresses and couches spread out in a circle where cubicles usually were, showed at least 14 people. Mostly they were making love like rabbits. It was clearly a swingers party, with men and women swapping partners at a fairly rapid pace. I paused the video in stunned shock. The link to the site appeared in an old mailbox we used for bills and other non-work stuff. It had originally belonged to her, but in recent years, we had both started using it. The letter was sent to our account by the school system's automated information system. Samantha worked in that system as a substitute school nurse, so I had no reason to doubt that it was a training video, as claimed. It was. The detached part of me noted that someone technically savvy or working in the school system had to be dealing with Samantha. I watched the video to the end and noticed that there were at least 40 more videos of the Secret Society of SX. Emotionally, I shut down. There was only white noise in my ears, and I wanted to scream, cry, and smash something at the same time. Lying cheater. I took a breath, and a mechanical calm finally took hold of me. When you design safety systems for dangerous environments, you quickly learn to react, not panic. I glanced at my watch. It was about an hour before class ended, if she was even on it. I started downloading the videos onto a flash drive. When they were all copied, I closed the link, erased that part of the story, and deleted the copies twice from my home computer. I reminded myself to stay calm. I needed to analyze this and make sure it was her. Anyone who could break into the school computer system could have tampered with the video. But with so many hours of footage, the potential for error was high. It took me a lot of self-control, but I managed not to lose it when Samantha came home. It didn't make any sense. She never lost her affection after our separation and spent every second with me whenever she could. When she had days off, she would bring me lunch to work. She seemed a little obsessed with making sure I knew where she was and could contact her. I told her I was working on a project to buy some time to sort through the videos. They were absolutely real. I did a lot of computer forensics and frame-by-frame analysis. There was no video mask, everything was real. It wasn't on all the videos, but a little over half of them. At least 24 separate orgies at different times, in a variety of locations. That night, I turned on the parental controls on her phone and set it to log calls and messages. A downloaded app streamed all of her calls as audio files to my laptop. Among them were people I knew. Daniel, who lived next door with his wife Hillary, Tamati, the cop from 2 houses down, and his apparently not-so-shy wife, Brittany, Phil, the guy from next door who I always thought was too smooth and a ladies' man. They were all there. There was also Barbara Hidalgo, who, like Samantha, never had a husband, Richard, the doctor's assistant from next door, and Charlotte, Samantha's friend who worked at the veterinary clinic. There were others, not always the same ones. Samantha was obviously eager to participate. Strangely, she was much more interested in women. I had never seen her show any interest in women, but in most of the videos that was her main activity. The coding of the videos narrowed the time frame. As I expected, all of the videos related to the time of my deployment, starting about 4 months after I left. None of them seemed to take place when I was home, but the gangbangs dated from the week after the end of one of my 3 15-day vacations. Putting the videos in order, I saw that in the earliest videos, Samantha was something of a recluse, a bit broody, as if she didn't want to be there. In the later videos, however, she really got involved, especially after teaming up with Mary. Her love for women was revealed around the 4th party, when she walked through the door with a sly smile, twirling a strap-on for rough play. In the last video she starred in, about a month and a half before her contract ended, she looked pensive again and left without doing anything more than taking off her clothes. Guilt, I assumed, though it was a little late for a sudden appearance of conscience. Perhaps she was more worried about being caught. A month and a half would give her time to recover and maybe get tested for STDs. In all, I identified 16 men and women in the video. Neighbors, co-workers, parents of the children's friends, several of our child's school teachers. I found out that Hillary, Daniel's wife, had always been the cameraman. It seems her specialty was to observe, although she occasionally participated while she was filming too. I would have spent more time analyzing and perhaps delayed the inevitable confrontation. I had never suspected anything like this, and I had a very hard time reconciling it with Samantha, whom I knew so well. The most important thing I needed to know was why this letter had appeared in the first place. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't like some weird joke. Whoever sent it definitely had a reason, and I doubted I would like it. Another letter appeared just 2 days later in the same inbox. It had the same link and another technically difficult-to-hack email address, the gym she went to. It just so happened that I logged into it first that day. In the browsing pane, I saw a message and a familiar link. Whoever it was getting results. I closed the browsing pane and set my cell phone on a charger with a streaming camera. It was streaming audio and video to my laptop over my home Wi-Fi. "Hey Samantha, did you pay for your gym membership this month?" She mewled. "I'm sure I did. Why?" I stood up. "I don't know. Probably a commercial. You have some kind of message from them marked urgent." "Really? That's weird. They don't send that often." "Yeah, I thought so." I kissed her forehead. "I need to write a synopsis of the project for work. It shouldn't take more than an hour." She nodded. "Will spaghetti work?" "That'll work." I headed up the stairs. Once I was there, I turned on the stream from my cell phone camera. Samantha took her time walking over to the computer. She nonchalantly clicked on the link, but gasped in shock at the first frame of the video. Frantically looking around, she checked what was happening in the hallway and then hurriedly watched the rest of the video. The cell phone video wasn't the best, but the transition from normal to shocking pale white and nauseating green was quite noticeable. She copied the link onto a piece of paper and deleted the email. I watched as she walked up the stairs, then staggered to her room, pulled out an old notebook, and began sending messages to her phone. I hurriedly opened the message log. "Samantha, the video from the party is gone." UI. "What?" "Yeah, they've been recorded for a long time. They're all over the internet." After a long pause while Samantha sent the link, a reply came back. UI. "Oh my God, who would do that?" Samantha. "I don't know. If Darwin finds them, he'll divorce me. Or good for me." UI. I thought you had an open marriage. Samantha. Not exactly. UI. So you had an open marriage, but you didn't tell Darwin it was open? Like Richard and his wife? Man, that's just a nightmare. Samantha. I'm not going to explain it now. UI. That was so long ago. Maybe you can tell him it was before we were married. We got married right out of high school, and I could never explain to you or Charlotte or Daniel. They knew about it too. The video shows Samantha struggling not to cry as she wrote the message. Samantha. This is destroying my life. They emailed me the link. She had every right to. I wasn't in the mood to forgive, but I needed to find out who was doing this to her. Maybe it was out of curiosity, maybe to delay the inevitable. Although the situation was horrible, I realized that whoever did this could have had a plan to make it worse. Just because they were after Samantha didn't mean they were my friends. It was probably blackmail. It could also mean they were seeking extortion. An enemy of my enemy, no more, but no less. Though calling Samantha an enemy would be too much. The discussion went on for several minutes. I wrote down the names and phone numbers they passed to each other. It was clear she was talking to Hillary. I learned a lot of new things. Daniel seemed to have died of a heart attack. This gave me mixed feelings. I had always respected the guy, but I didn't know about his feelings for my wife. After their conversation, I followed the ones I could. Hillary became a sought-after videographer for music videos. Tamati and Brittany broke up. He worked as a detective in New York. She moved to California and remarried. I thought it wouldn't be long before she got references. One of the school teachers, Robin, ended up in jail. Apparently she poisoned her 2 husbands to get insurance. Heck, I went to the funeral of the first of them as soon as we moved in. She was supposed to be granted probation in 10 years. Barbara died at a rave party after taking a pill they gave her instead of ecstasy. It turned out to contain too much synthetic cocaine and impurities. The man who gave it to her was already serving at least 6 years in prison. Richard went back to medical school and became a gynecologist in Los Angeles. His wife, who also did not appear in the video, stayed with him. Richard always held Charlotte in his arms. Afterward, Samantha often checked a shared email account. She seemed fragile and jumped up every time I did something on the computer. I didn't worry about missing anything because I set up the account to receive copies of everything that came in. I also set up surveillance cameras around the house. 2 days later, Hillary texted Samantha. I just got a call from Brittany. She is totally desperate. Someone sent her a link. UI. At least I'm not the only one. Did they say anything? Hillary. No, just the link. Why not to you? Hillary. I don't know. I'm not dating anyone, so maybe I have nothing to gain. There's nothing to blackmail. I can't pay. Darwin would find out. We only have joint accounts. Hillary. I don't want to make this worse, but what if they don't want the money? What do you mean by that? Hillary. I don't know. I'm just thinking. What? What if they want revenge or something? Who? Hillary. Barbara's husband, Richard's wife, your husband. I don't know. Somebody. For the next few weeks, Samantha watched me like a hawk, and I tried not to give her any reason to worry. I wanted to find out who was doing this and what they wanted before I worried too much. I just checked the logs and kept my visibility. The stress made her physically ill. She suffered from frequent headaches, vomited frequently, and she lost several pounds in weight. I did my due diligence. At first it was part of the game, but then I was genuinely concerned when I noticed that her jeans weren't holding up without a belt. It was a strange feeling to be angry with her and worry about her at the same time. The fact that she was sick made it easier for me in a way. If she hadn't been so sick, she probably would have wondered why we weren't making love. Hillary contacted her from time to time. 2 other women received links, Charlotte and Dorothy Cruz, our son's former teacher. I didn't immediately recognize her in the video because she wasn't referred to by her last name. She was only in 6 clips, and Hillary spent more time showing her admittedly cute ass than her rather plain face. Besides, I didn't know her that well. The fact that it was women who were targeted convinced me that this was probably one of the guys trying to set up a network for money and love games. But then the guys might not have called Hillary, so who could have known? Things were quiet for a week, until I heard audio from the voice recorder I had set up on the main phone line. Samantha picked up the phone. "Hello? This is Mary." Samantha sighed. "What do you want?" Mary had a soft and gentle voice. "Hillary contacted me. She told me about your problems. I thought I could help, since you and I are, you know." "Really?" I did a little investigating, checked the link. All the videos were downloaded from Chicago in the last 4 months from internet cafes. "Did your husband travel to Chicago?" "No, he's been here the whole time. Are you sure?" "Yes, absolutely sure." "Could they have hacked into his computer?" "Probably, but I would have seen traces. The erase cycle was too short to erase the security footage, but I changed that. Now we'll have to wait until they come back." Samantha sank heavily into a kitchen chair. "Thank you." She paused. "I'm afraid. I think it might be Phil, the guy I used to date. I remember him. I didn't like him." Samantha put her head down on her hands, trying to keep her composure. "Yes, he was. More than you can imagine. I remember him talking about how Richard liked to be messed with. He was always trying to look manly and all that. Remember how confused he got when you suggested he do it?" Samantha smiled slightly, though her heart was broken. "I thought he was going to faint right away." "Yeah, he was so macho." Mary laughed, but her tone became more serious. "Are you okay, honey?" Samantha snorted, suppressing her tears. "Not really. If you need help, call me. Anytime. I still miss you, you know." "That would be impossible, you know." "Yeah, I know. It was too big a risk. Sometimes I think we could have tried," Samantha cried. "I have to leave. Call me anytime. I love you, honey. Damn. I could sell tickets to this drama and make money off of it." Still, Samantha didn't seem to worry about me anymore, though her health continued to be a concern. I even began to feel sorry for her. My initial anger gave way to time and a difficult situation. In preparation, I began sending audio files and text logs to my cell phone so I could spend less time upstairs, and all it took was reviewing footage from cameras placed around the house. There was little activity. Samantha spent some days working at school, doing chores, and watching TV. Every now and then, Hillary would text her and ask how she was doing, and occasionally Mary would show up. It soon became clear that Samantha had become emotionally involved with Mary, and they broke up when I returned. Mary tried to talk Samantha into meeting and a possible threesome, but Samantha feared the consequences if things went wrong. I sensed that both parties still had deep feelings. Mary didn't seem to have a husband or boyfriend, and perhaps that's why she was alone. About a week later, Mary called. "I know who it is. I'm sending you the video from the internet cafe. It's really the sleazy Phil you thought it was." Samantha's voice sounded almost lifeless. "He said it was over, that we'd never speak again. You know I never liked him. The only reason I put up with him was because he brought you into our group. Damn sneaky guy." Samantha stared at her phone for a second. "Shit. That's him in the video. He's gotten significantly better." I hacked into the webcam on the computer of the girl behind him and hooked it up to the camera footage so you can see what he's doing there. "I had to be careful, Mary. She knows exactly what she's doing." I could hear Samantha crying all night. The next day, I removed all the ammo from the gun and locked it in my toolbox. I also removed the strong pain medications from the medicine cabinet. Despite my anger and resentment, I didn't want a suicide on my conscience that I could have prevented, and there was no way I wanted to explain that to the kids. I had almost decided to tell Samantha about it tonight, but at the end of the day, I received another audio file. I wasn't busy, so I listened to it right after the call. Samantha picked up the phone, saying hello in a half-whisper. "Hi, Samantha, it's Phil. We need to talk." I could hear her shock and despair. "Why are you doing this? We had an agreement. Just cooperate with me and everything will be fine." Samantha's voice was shaky, almost lifeless. What do you want? Meet me next Saturday at the River Hotel in Jamesville. I'll send you the room number. I can't. I don't have any money I can deliver to you without Darwin finding out. You'll find something, or Darwin will find out. We'll discuss how much Saturday. Don't forget to wear panties, Phil wheezed. Samantha almost screamed. You bastard. You said it was over. Phil grinned derisively. I destroyed all the evidence as promised, but now we have a new deal. You're going to copulate with me and everything will be fine. This time I won't risk going to jail for participating in a crime. You're a terrible person. Yeah. I'll explain everything, Darwin. Of course. One look at that gangbang video and it's over. No one's going to help you. Just do what I say. We'll have fun whenever I want. You deliver me some money or jewelry or whatever else you want, and we'll be friends again. For how long? How long? As long as I enjoy it. Phil hung up the phone. I had already started trying to get this man out of Samantha's head, but his blackmail seemed to be threatening her all over the place. He had managed to buy time. I immediately called home, making the excuse that I needed to discuss dinner. I suggested Samantha go out for steak. Apparently going outside had calmed her down a bit. She looked pale and exhausted, but a little refreshed. I was able to comfort her as she fell asleep by cradling her head against my shoulder. The next morning she was feeling better, and I went to work. Once there, I grabbed my cell phone and called Mary. She answered, Hello? Mary, this is Darwin. Samantha's husband. We need to talk. About what? Listen, I found out about your little club and the blackmail that's going on right now. I know about Phil. We'll talk about the details later. I don't know how things will work out, but she's the mother of my children. I need to protect them from this situation. I'm sure you have feelings for Samantha, so this might be your chance to help. You're a programmer. You have the technical skills to help us with this case. I didn't elaborate on exactly how I learned of her abilities by watching Samantha. She was obviously cautious for obvious reasons. Depends on exactly what you need. Trouble with Phil. He's threatening her, demanding money and time in bed. He wants to meet her at the River Hotel next weekend. Mary sighed. Looks like Phil's got a hold on her. She's not the type to give in easily. Usually at our club it was customary for married couples to join, but single women like me could join too. The rule was that if a man joined, he absolutely had to bring a woman with him, otherwise it would turn into a sausage fest. She was telling everyone that you have an open marriage while you are away. Judging from the video, she was starting to sound like one, but I think you're right. She mentioned some kind of deal. Sounds like blackmail to me. If she did give in and he started blackmailing her, then nothing. She should have confided in me and told me what was going on. We could have worked something out, but now, damn it. You're not really forgiving her, are you? Her voice sounded sad rather than judgmental. Try watching your faithful wife sleep with someone else without your knowledge and see how you'd react. She was silent, clearly aware that I knew of her involvement in this. She doesn't know I'm aware, and I think if I told her, it would be too much. I don't like her voice when she sounds like she's giving up. Just give her a call, find out something about Phil, and warn her against doing something stupid. At least the other ones. Mary relaxed, almost audibly. I'll talk to her. One more question. Why the hell do you let someone videotape your parties? It's not the smartest idea. 15 years ago, the internet wasn't like it is now. No one could have imagined it would grow so fast. We thought it wouldn't hurt to have insurance to show that everyone agreed, and everyone was of legal age, after the incident at one of the ERO clubs in the area. All the tapes should have been destroyed years ago. But apparently that didn't happen. I trusted the man who was supposed to do it. Everyone trusted him. Hillary? Mary was silent for a moment before I continued. I've watched about 30 hours of video, so I know quite a bit. And what did you do to her? Probably, almost certainly, but I'll deal with that after we deal with this asshole. We? She sighed. Do you love her? I do, I said. Then we'll work it out, she decided. The next day after work, I headed to the Sunrise Inn in Iverson, where Mary had invited me. The door was opened by a tall and slender black woman, eyeing me critically. Come in, she said. I entered slowly, raising my hands to show I was unarmed. But it didn't matter. In her hand was a small assault rifle pointed at me. Carefully lifting my shirt, I turned around to show that I had no weapon. I sat down in the chair by the bed. On the desk was a high-tech laptop with several windows of code open. So, I began. So, she encouraged. Simply put, I don't know what the future holds for Samantha. Probably nothing good, but we'll talk about that later. Phil, on the other hand, needs to be dealt with once and for all. Even if he can't blackmail me through her, he can release the video to her friends, family, and children. And that includes other people. Some of them may not deserve these consequences. Mary looked at me thoughtfully. You kick her out, and I'll help her cope, she suggested. I shrugged. We'll figure it out. I'm not sure how I feel about her. I keep telling myself what's going on, but maybe it's important. I just don't want her to do anything stupid. It could ruin her life and the kids' lives. I don't want her to keep making mistakes with Phil, especially if it involves money. Do you have a plan? She asked. There are some ideas, but we need complete mutual trust to succeed, I replied. She thought for a moment, then took the safety off her gun and placed it on the table. I felt more relaxed. My plan involves some serious steps, but by no means murder. That's only if he survives, which isn't guaranteed, I explained. I'm on board. She's my girlfriend, she said with confidence and undeniable loyalty. Maybe we should let him get what he wants, she suggested. I thought you were trying to avoid that. You know he wants a bed and money, I remarked. Have you ever heard the phrase, beware what you wish for? She raised an eyebrow, smiling at the implication. I presented the plan and explained Mary's role in it. She smiled. Sly, you have a black sense of humor. I like it. I'll take over the computer and more. I worked in London for 4 years. I can pull up a bit of a London accent. I nodded. Great. We need help, but they need to be totally involved or not at all. I'll let you know if Samantha decides to join. I don't want her dragged into everything if something goes wrong. My kids don't want any trouble. We devised and detailed a plan, discussing every detail over the course of an hour. I was assured that if I couldn't handle Samantha, Mary could. We worked well together, and I began to appreciate her more and more. Despite the need to involve others, she recognized the risks associated with any new ideas for the video. We set up a schedule of activities and a timeline for completion. Before she left, she stopped me. Samantha said you have an open marriage. I didn't realize it wasn't until I was confronted with it. Until then, I thought she trusted me. And I thought she did too. She's still in a state of shock. I can't say it's easy for either of us. Mary lowered her gaze. I'm sorry for the way things turned out. I just didn't know. It's all because of Samantha. I don't know what the hell she believed. Temporary insanity. But that's no excuse for something like that. Mary kept calling Samantha and urging her to relax, promising that she would go to the meeting herself and find out what he really wanted. She also kept track of Phil's movements, so when he arrived late Friday night, we were ready for him. I walked up to his door wearing my cap, checking carefully for witnesses. He was probably 100 pounds heavier than he had been 15 years ago, bloated and clumsy. No wonder he thought blackmailing someone into bed was a good idea. I held out the pizza bag. That'll be $20. He started fumbling for something in his wallet. As soon as he lowered his gaze, I stuck a flashlight stun gun under his ear and pressed the button, keeping him from passing out or malfunctioning until he collapsed to the ground, making weird squeaky noises. I quickly grabbed him by the hair and dragged him inside, Mary slipping in behind me. Damn, he was heavy. I gave him another shot from the stun gun, telling myself it was to keep him from crashing, but doubting it myself before zipping up his arms and legs. Mary handed me a syringe without a needle, and I injected a horse tranquilizer into his throat. We made ourselves comfortable and waited for it to take effect. Mary called to the others and quietly let them into the house. Together we hauled it out to the parking lot in a laundry cart and took the long way around. We needed to find a secluded spot. Upon arrival, I sat down next to him while the others set up. When he came around on Saturday morning, Mary was sitting in front of him. He looked around restlessly, realizing he was in an abandoned industrial building. Although he didn't know it, we were in a car storage building at an abandoned gravel pit. Mary leaned forward. "Hi, Phil. Long time no see. You shouldn't have gotten involved with my girlfriend. You know how I feel about her." Phil couldn't speak. He was gagged in his mouth. He'd been bought at a love shop 100 miles away. He was stripped and tied to an elaborate bondage system that could be adjusted to any vulnerable and humiliating position. Velcro handcuffs were replaced with hard leather cuffs with buckles designed for resistance. For more humiliation, we dressed him up in a XXXL schoolgirl costume, applied lots of blue eyeshadow, a bright red wig with pigtails, neon pink lipstick, and attached lots of pink plastic hairpins. Mary even painted his toenails on his hands and feet. Mary walked up behind him. I walked around to his front. "Hi, Phil. I never liked you, but at least now I know why." He was really starting to struggle. I shrugged. "It's all in the past, or it would be if you had the sense to leave it alone. I probably never would have found out. I honestly had my suspicions that something was going on, but not enough to make me want to dig into it. If I had found out, I probably would have divorced her, or maybe not, but I almost certainly wouldn't have thought about you. But here we are, and you had to go and stir up a hornet's nest with a stick. Now you have my full, undivided attention." I unbuckled the gag for a moment and left it hanging while I stuffed a turkey baster in his mouth and injected a mixture of tequila, ecstasy, fentanyl, and Viagra down his throat. After making sure he swallowed the entire mixture, I reinserted the gag and positioned the bondage chair so that he was in a position like he was bent over a chair. Mary unzipped the duffel bag and began to undress. I looked over at her. Phil couldn't see what was going on behind his back, and I could tell he was scared, as he should have been. If he could see what I could see behind him along the wall, he would be even more scared. Mary undressed completely, then caught my eye with a sly smile, winked, and slowly twirled in a pirouette. She had put on a little weight over the years, but just enough to go from an AA cup to a B cup and add some curves where none existed before. Now she did have an ass, whereas before it had been straight as a board. Then she slowly dressed in an ER version of Catwoman's black PVC costume, with a mask and thigh-length boots. On her right buttock, she had a large temporary tattoo of a mank and a skull. As she held out the high-end video camera to him, he saw her black gloved hand, and it made him tense up for a moment. I checked the camera and stood a little to the side of him and in front of him. Mary pulled out her secateurs and looked at me and Hillary, who had the same camera. I nodded. "Whenever you're ready." I started recording. She passed it around with exaggerated importance. "Ooh, look at the little sheep we have today." Her accent was almost perfect, at least as far as I could tell. "You paid for this on top, so let me start it off right." "Holy shit, this is the ticket. I've been holding it for you for hours." He started to resist, causing her to bring her stump down on his back with force, even as she continued to relieve herself. That damn girl must have an iron bladder. "That's enough, you. Take it like the little brute you are." Then she slid off him and nimbly walked up to his side. She brought her whip down on his ass with a swing, then another and another, until I was worried she was getting too carried away. Some of the scars filled with blood before she caught herself. She made a hand sign and I turned off the camera and walked over to her while she looked down, breathing heavily. "Are you okay?" She turned away and stood silent for a second, then pulled off her mask and looked up at me with eyes full of tears. "I just hate that he did that to Samantha." I caught her hand before she launched her stump into it again, then put my arm around her shoulders. Relax, stick to the plan. It'll make him a lot more miserable for a lot longer. She clung to me for a moment, then put her mask back on. I can do that. She signaled for me to write it down again, and she walked over to a black duffel bag and pulled out an obscenely large device. Look what I have for you, sweetheart. It's your favorite big black stallion, Kong. I shuddered. The damn thing looked like an elephant's trunk. She started rubbing it on my face. This is going to hurt a lot. We turned off the cameras and brought him back to an upright position. He closed his eyes and cried silently. I used a turkey baster to give him Gatorade. I didn't care if he survived or not. If I wanted to just kill him, I would have done it with a simple headshot. We changed him into his Sailor Moon costume, adding a blonde wig with blue bows, then put him in place. On the green outdoor rug, we set up a sky blue background and added a few small flowers. Mary stealthily stepped aside as another figure stepped out of the shadows from the wall. It was a short woman, not fat but stocky, dressed in a teddy bear costume. She carried a small wicker picnic basket in her hands. Her outfit included boots and gloves with fur paws, a fur corset with an open cup, a pink bow tie, and a headpiece in the shape of a smiling teddy bear. For a moment, I wondered where people got such costumes, but I preferred not to ask the question. Charlotte adjusted the bow tie, then walked over to Phil, lifted the mask for a moment so he could see her face, then lowered it and signaled for the recording to begin. A high, squeaky voice began. "Hello, sheep. Welcome to the teddy bear's picnic." The next half hour was one of the most surreal spectacles I've ever witnessed. Unlike Mary, whose demeanor radiated barely contained rage and aggressive humiliation, Charlotte maintained a sickeningly sweet speech, sang cute but perverted songs, told cute but vulgar stories, and chanted an array of absolutely obscene nursery rhymes. All the while she continued to mock him. She also arranged a beautiful flower arrangement. Phil had to hold a rather large vase, though not in his hands, which looked incredibly uncomfortable. The hard slap of a pink paw-shaped paddle sounded to the tune of "Hot Cross Buns," turned into a lewd parody. Finally, she approached my cell. "You know what I think? I think no picnic would be special without an appetizer." Odd Bear brought out a small plastic tea plate with a small slice of sponge cake on it. "Oops, we forgot the topping. You can't have a treat without it." By then, he was too stoned to realize what was going on and was devouring the cake, and Charlotte Bear giggled. Well, wasn't that a fun picnic? So, we brought it back upright, separated and rinsed it, giving it some more Gatorade. Meanwhile, we transformed the site into the look of a rundown subway restroom, using toilet stalls from real restrooms, as well as the sink already installed. A couple of printed subway signs gave the place an especially authentic look. Dorothy and Brittany were dressed up in black PVC suits, which looked rather revealing considering their good physical shape. They completed their look with gruesome black pig masks that resembled mimes. They silently smeared it with a brown slurry, chocolate syrup from the fake toilet we had installed. From the outside, it looked like they had covered it with some kind of excrement. They pinned almost every inch of his body with pins and took turns using the handle of the toilet plunger. Then they pulled mutilated wet chocolate bars out of the toilet bowl and made him eat them. The final scene took place against an industrial backdrop, and this time Mary brought along another woman in a blood-red Catwoman costume. She had a matching tattoo of a skull with shackles. The red cat spoke with a deep Southern Belle accent, which contrasted with Mary's stiff Chelsea accent. They rolled him over onto his back, inserted a ring gag into his mouth to keep his mouth open, and then took turns sitting over him and relieving themselves. Without ceremony, they humiliated him for the next half hour, frequently switching places. When the video ended, the red Catwoman took off her mask and looked at me with tears in her eyes. Samantha obviously didn't know what to say. On the eve of Phil's arrival, Mary finally told her the whole truth. She insisted that Samantha had to be sure that after that, Phil would no longer be able to exert any influence over her. I was too dumbfounded by what was happening to say anything, so I just turned to Mary and told her that we needed to clean this up. We rinsed Phil off and moved him to a chair. We burned all the outfits and toys in a 55-gallon metal barrel that I had brought specifically for this purpose. Before they left, they talked quietly with Samantha and Mary in the corner. Just before Charlotte, Brittany, and Dorothy left, I noticed a few concerned looks in my direction. Hillary took the video from the cameras and spent the next few hours editing and enhancing it, cutting, blending, and adding sound effects and music. She added pre-recorded subway announcements and periodic rumbling sounds to the restroom video. She seemed to really enjoy adding cartoonish sound effects and silly music to the weird teddy bear picnic video. While she was doing that, Mary was working at her laptop, putting the finishing touches on the plan. Samantha and I used the outdoor sprayers with bleach to completely clean up the area. She still couldn't find anything to say. I periodically checked to see if Phil was alive. He was alive, and while I was generally ambivalent about that status, I realized that adding murder to the list of crimes we'd committed was probably a bad idea. If things went even remotely according to plan, he would have no proof that anything had happened. All of his blackmail material would be destroyed, and we would be rid of the problem for good. By the time he came to his senses, it was nearing nightfall. I gave him some Gatorade, this time in a bottle with a straw. He didn't say anything. I was sure he was sure I was planning to kill him. "Welcome back, Phil." He stared at me, eyes wide and still stunned. "Where did you get the video, Phil? Don't make me ask you twice. I have a car battery and some cables I'd like to try out on you." He looked at the ground. When Daniel died, Hillary had to go back to her hometown for a week for his funeral. I snuck over to her house and copied them. I realized it went something like this. "This is where I'll tell you what's going to happen. Once we drop you off, I never want to hear from you again. If you file a complaint with the police, you're gone forever. You tell anyone about this, you're gone forever. You recognize some of the people here, but there are others who helped set you up who were never here. If anyone investigates, they'll find out that you personally ordered and paid for all the toys used today." I grabbed his face. "They were delivered to your apartment in Chicago. You paid for the video cameras. Your computer will show you did everything. Don't look for anything in your apartment. It's all gone. If you have backups, I recommend you destroy them." Brittany's ex-husband texted to let her know he had cleaned out the apartment. "We deleted the website you created and used a multi-platform virus called Dry Rot to track and destroy copies of the videos you used. It may miss some videos, but it should get most of them. We felt that just taking content from your viewers wasn't really fair, and we didn't want to leave you without money, so..." I turned the laptop to face Phil. His website had been replaced by a much more professional one, with a banner that read, "Lil Bitch Adventure World." He stared at the screen in horror. Brightly colored cartoon captions offered downloadable clips, and small low-resolution videos ran side by side. Bitch vs. Catwoman. The Adventure of the Lil Sheep. Lil Bitch Picnic Teddy Bear. Catwoman and Furious Kitty teach the little bitch a lesson. Worse, the visitor counter was ticking like a world population clock, and the download indicator was practically in the red zone. Phil turned green and immediately vomited Gatorade. "Look on the bright side, Phil. You kind of got what you wanted. It looks like a good amount of money is flowing into your site, and you got to make love to all the women you were trying to blackmail. Maybe not quite what you expected, but still, a bed is a bed, right?" I gave him more tranquilizer mixed with ecstasy, fentanyl, and Viagra. I really hoped I didn't overdose him and lower his blood pressure with Viagra. Samantha and Charlotte had carefully calculated the doses, but there were no guarantees, especially in the mix. When he passed out, we dressed him in a size XXXXL red lace teddy. Samantha put even more garish Dragon Lady-style makeup on him, quickly shaved his head, and glued on a long black wig. I pulled into the van we had borrowed from a repair shop that was temporarily closed because the owner was in jail for domestic battery. I had already put fake company signs and other license plates on the van. When we finished loading it into the van, Samantha finally said something to me. "Where are we taking this piece of shit?" I smiled for the first time ever. I figured he could continue his adventures, I guess waking up in Memphis's Tenderloin neighborhood, in an alley, with no ID or money, dressed like that, violently aroused from Viagra might broaden his horizons. She giggled. A little too long and a little too hard, but it was the first sign of humor she'd shown in weeks. Mary sat in the back seat, scribbling away on her ubiquitous laptop while I drove, and Samantha stared out the passenger window with her arms wrapped around herself. The whole drive was uneasy. Mary tried to strike up a conversation every now and then, but Samantha just wallowed in her misery. When we reached Memphis, stopping only once for gas and once more for gas and coffee, it took us about half an hour to find a place perfect for dumping our toxic waste. When we found a suitable abandoned alley and rolled out onto the street, Samantha shuddered. I guess I should be glad I'm not the one in that nightgown. There was a fragile wistfulness in her tone. She wasn't sure she wasn't next on the agenda for something like this. I figured I'd better say something before visions of a one-way cargo ship trip to a brothel in the Congo put her in a state of complete panic. "You're the mother of our children, and even if they grow up, when the grandchildren are born, they're going to need a grandmother. I don't know where we go from here, but this wasn't about revenge. It was about solving a current problem. Not that I don't enjoy doing it with him." I could see the look of relief on her face. About 2 hours away from Memphis, Samantha spoke. "Can we talk? All three of us. I want to tell you what happened. Everything." "I don't need everything. I have enough video for that." My voice sounded a little calmer than I expected. "That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how it started. Why it started." Phil's comment about being an accessory after the fact suddenly came to mind. Perhaps I really need to know. "We'll talk at home." She squirmed a little in a lump, but nodded. Once we got home and settled in, we sat down in the living room and settled into our chairs, looking at each other. I nodded to Samantha. "This is your story." She stared at her feet and took a deep breath. "Phil had proof that I killed a man." That got my attention, and Mary straightened up sharply. "What?" "I went to Charlotte's sister's bachelorette party. I drank a little bit, but I watched what I was doing and didn't get drunk or anything. I had one pina colada." She looked down at her feet. "As I found out later, the dancers had some kind of deal with the bartender. They had him slip something in our drinks to make everyone lose their minds. Ecstasy and a bunch of other shit. They did it often enough to know what they were doing. I think because of the lowered inhibitions and the already hot atmosphere, the dancers usually made love in a big way. The girls having bachelorette parties didn't tell anyone that things got out of hand, so they got away with it all the time." I looked at her. "And how does that lead to murder?" "Not murder. I looked it up. Aggravated murder. But that's pretty much the same sentence. I tried to leave early. I felt sick and dizzy and the music was too loud. I didn't realize I was drugged. I thought I had the flu or something. One of the dancers followed me out of the club and tried to climb into the back seat of the minivan. I was too stupefied by whatever they put in the drinks to even realize it was there. I rear-ended it, then braked and rear-ended it again. I don't even remember how I did it or how I got home." "Jesus." Mary looked as horrified as I was. "Phil worked at the club as a security guard, part-time. A few days later, he showed up with security footage. He said he'd reported to the police that someone had snuck in and stolen the tapes. If I didn't cooperate, he'd pretend he'd found them somewhere in the club. No one could believe I wasn't drunk driving and staggering around the van. He faked it. They had just put a drunk driver in jail for hitting a homeless man in heavy fog, so I knew what was coming. If I fought it, I'd go to jail for 20 years and you'd go broke trying to save me. Even if I begged you not to, you would still spend all the money we had on me. I couldn't do that to you and the kids." It was the truth, and I knew it. She continued. "I made a deal. I would be his partner in the swingers club. That was his main business. I refused to do anything else. I told him I had to take care of the kids, and even hiring babysitters for swinging party nights could be suspicious. He agreed. He wasn't thrilled about it, but he agreed. He made it clear that if he thought I told you, he would turn me in. I didn't realize I'd been drugged until almost a year after he told me, and by then it was too late. I couldn't prove anything. He said he'd let me go when you came back, and he did, until now. You didn't look too trapped in many of the videos, I pronounced, though I couldn't help but remember her lost look in the very first videos myself. I tried to stay out of it as much as I could at first. Phil warned me that if I didn't start showing more enthusiasm, I might end up in jail. I was just stunned by the whole thing. I realized that everyone in this business has secrets. Hillary had her own cell. Ben wanted women to be honest with him. Charlotte was just crazy. Samantha shook her head with a half smile. She was just surviving by her own rules. I nodded, understanding her words. There was logic in her eyes, memories of how she felt in that trap. Her gaze was unfocused and filled with anxiety. She exhaled slowly, her body trembling. Her face looked even more exhausted and sullen, and her voice became quiet and poured with emotion. When there's no choice, things get easier. You pretend everything is fine. You pretend someone else is doing it. Then you come home and tear into the toilet all night. You take showers so hot and long you think your skin will burn. You look at the pill bottles in the medicine cabinet and think about how easy it would be to swallow them all. But then you remember you have kids, and you don't want them to find you cold and dead. So you don't take the pills. But then you do it again. And again. And again. I planned to kill myself after you were home and able to take care of the kids so you'd never know. I even wanted to make it look like an accident, but you got a job offer here and we had to move. It was like being let off death row. Even then, I couldn't tell you. That would have made you an accessory, and I couldn't risk you ending up in jail because of me. To this day, I'm still not sure Phil destroyed those tapes. I leaned back in my chair. Jesus. Mary made a quiet, gasping sound, and I turned to her. There were already signs of gray in her gaze. I swear to God I didn't know. I'm so sorry, she muttered, standing up and stumbling, starting to retreat toward the door. I didn't think to stop her until she fell to her knees, wrenching herself free. I figured it out before Samantha did. Mary realized she had become an unwitting accomplice to a prolonged rape. Samantha was so stunned, had built walls in her head so hard, that she initially couldn't understand why Mary was so horrified. She had time to come to terms with it, and Mary didn't. Phil didn't hold a gun to Samantha's temple, but he could have. I wondered if we'd been too lenient with him. Maybe we should have finished the bastard off. Samantha grabbed towels, and we helped Mary to recover. She trembled at every touch from her, apologizing in whispers over and over. We brought her back to the living room, where she began apologizing again until Samantha interrupted her. Mary, you were a pillar for me. You didn't know what was going on, only Phil did. You were the one person who looked at me as more than just a warm body with comfortable holes. Your love probably saved me on those nights when everything seemed hopeless and I was contemplating suicide. I looked at Samantha, and she sighed. I'm sorry, Darwin, but I needed someone. I felt something more for her. I loved her. And maybe I still do. She needed to find her footing after the shipwreck. She clung to anything that could sustain her. Mary was the lucky one who cared enough to let her go without resistance when I returned. I understand, she said. Samantha shook her head. I love Mary, it's true. And I always will. But I'm yours, all the way. And I always will be. You can kick me out after this, but I'll never leave you if I have a choice. Maybe I messed up, but I didn't know what else to do. I looked over at her hugging a curled-up Mary. I walked over and sat down next to her. I'm not sure. You can't discuss this with a lawyer. I realized I'd made a choice. I think you did the best you could. You did what you thought was best for me and the kids. That's all I could ask for. Her eyes went wide, and she looked at me almost pleadingly. Really? Are you really ready to forgive me? It's going to be okay. I don't know if forgive is the right word. You were betrayed. You didn't have many choices. You chose the least evil for all of us, even if it brought you suffering. She pressed herself against me. And now what? We go day by day. But your skinny ass needs to start eating sandwiches. You're just skin and bones. I reached across her and touched Mary's shoulder. You saved her. I'll never forget that. Mary nodded. She was still a little gray, but had already recovered from the shock. Samantha, a lot of things make sense now. Yeah, I'm glad we had what we had. I wish he hadn't had all that shit. Samantha kissed her gently on the forehead. Me too. But you'll always be my girl. I'll always love you. Mary smiled softly. Just not like that? I kind of knew this would happen. It's the same choice you made before, but I can dream, can't I? Her smile turned a little crooked as she shifted her gaze to me. I owe everything to you, Mary. We'll always be there for each other. I said seriously. Without her, my house could have turned into a grave. Samantha and I set Mary up in the guest room, and for a while, we just held on to each other. Over the next few days, we figured out everything we could. Samantha insisted that I find out what had happened since everything was back to normal. Finding the incident wasn't hard. A male dancer had been killed by a driver who hit him on the road outside the club. Mary managed to get a copy of his arrest record. Drugs, repeatedly beating a woman. He was also charged with aggravated rape, which had been dropped after the victim got publicity and fled the neighborhood. It was pretty obvious what he was going to do to Samantha. Samantha had no way of knowing that. She didn't even know she had hit him. The police always look for the simplest explanation. She would almost certainly have been put in jail. Perhaps she could have gotten away with it if she had known she was under the influence of drugs and gotten tested right away. But even that wasn't certain. Mary eventually returned home, though she promised to visit from time to time. She and Samantha would remain the closest of friends, but forever former lovers. Mary had a hard time reconciling herself to her participation in Samantha's hell, albeit unwittingly. In the end, we hope she finds the princess she's been searching for so long. At least she started looking again. I thought about going back and finishing the job on Phil. What he did was unspeakable, inhuman, but I decided against it. Not because he'd suffered enough already, and not because I just wanted to leave things as they were. I left it as it was because it was probably the cruelest thing I could do to him. His experience had broken something. Samantha and I got a call from Hillary. Phil called her and humbly asked for her help. It seems Little Bitch was a hit with a certain perverted demographic who paid very good money to watch his absolute humiliation on video. We got him to that state by accident. Probably because he associated the fentanyl high with humiliation, he became increasingly obsessed with it. He quickly got to the point where he could only get satisfaction from watching and reliving the self-mockery. But he needed fresh videos for the site and new humiliations for himself. Each time they became more and more extreme. It didn't take long to realize what was happening. Pilots call it a graveyard spiral. He thought he was flying level, but in reality he was just moving in a deadly circle, losing altitude and getting closer and closer to the final, inevitable crash. Last time I checked, he had added several new videos to his site with Hillary's help. Among them were Lil Baby and the Big Tranny Band, Fun Slaps, The Bigger the Better, and All the Way to the Heels. Hillary refused to shoot the video, but showed him how to set up the cameras himself. I guess she didn't want to be there at the end. He begged Hillary to put Catwoman and Angry Kitty together for another video. This is his most popular video. Unfortunately, second place goes to Teddy Bear. Knowing this, I double-check the doors at night. Samantha and Mary are completely uninterested.